super excited to be here, and yeah, let's dive right into it. Oh. So today I wanted to talk about mobile, and well, I love mobile, and I've been working on mobile on the mobile platform for most of my career, and that actually, it sounds a little corny, but that actually kind of started out in my youth. So as a kid, I always wanted to be some kind of superhero. But at some point I realized you needed magic for that, and that was not possible. Well, illustration was also not going to be my my craft of choice. So then I got into computers. And what I loved about computers is that they could still make me some kind of superhero. First of all, I could play them in video games, but also I could, there's all these things that computers can do for you, which makes you much more powerful and allow you to kind of work without magic, but still do magical things. So all of a sudden, through computers, being a superhero was not privileged to people with superpowers anymore. So this is what I looked like as a kid. And one of the things I love about computers, like I said with the superpower thing, is that they really empower people to do better things, and they can really accelerate kind of our thinking. And I can talk about that forever, but there's a guy that can say that way better than I can, which is Steve Jobs. And he has this great metaphor for how to kind of understand the power of computers and technology. Magic. So anyways, I wanted to play a little video in which he explains that.
I remember reading an article when I was about 12 years old, I think it might have been in Scientific American, where they measured the efficiency of locomotion for all these species on planet Earth. How many kilocalories did they expend to get from point A to point B? And the condor one came in at the top of the list, surpassed everything else, and humans came in about a third of the way down the list, which was not such a great showing for the crown of creation. And but somebody there had the imagination to test the efficiency of a human riding a bicycle. Human riding a bicycle blew away the condor, all the way off the top of the list. And it made a really big impression on me that we humans are tool builders, and that we can fashion tools that amplify these inherent abilities that we have to spectacular magnitudes. And so for me, a computer has always been a bicycle of the mind, something that takes us far beyond our inherent abilities. And I think we're just at the early stages of this tool. Very early stages, and we've come only a very short distance, and it's still in its formation, but already we've seen enormous changes. I think that's nothing compared to what's coming in the next 100 years.
So what I love about this metaphor is that it really explains how computers can make us do things faster and better, and can really help us be like superhumans and give us some kind of superpowers. So but one thing I always find very sad about this is that a lot of things get lost in translation. So as a human, if you want to express your idea to a computer, you have to use the interfaces that are available, so the keyboard and the mouse. And a lot of things are not, you're not able to express with those tools. So throughout my career, I've always been fascinated by bringing computers and humans closer together. And I studied AI to hopefully make computers understand humans a little better. But this is also the reason that I really like mobile, because I think mobile is much more closer to the person, to the user, than desktop PCs. So the superheroes of today might not look as glamorous as I expected them to be, but people do have some kind of superpowers with these phones. I mean, you have all the information of the world at your fingertips, and you might not be able to teleport, but you can summon a car through Uber, or if it's too far away, you can go on FaceTime and you can be present anywhere on the planet. So there's these endless possibilities, and they really kind of help us technology helps us to do more productive things, but also to do more fun stuff, I guess. So as I said, I've been working on mobile for most of my career. And a few years back, I joined this company called WeTransfer. We're in the business of sharing ideas, which sounds a little cryptic, but basically means we transfer big files from A to B. And we've done that for around 10 years. And recently, we've shifted from like the web product towards more of a suite of tools for our audience, which are mostly creatives. So we now have 4 products. We have a web product and 3 apps, I guess. And they're all in the purpose of all is sharing ideas. So we have the mobile product, which I'm working on. And then we have this beautiful app called Paper. We actually acquired this company called 53, and they built this beautiful drawing app that's very nice to kind of sketch out ideas. We have a presentation tool called Paste. It's a very fast presentation tool to kind of collaborate in teams. And then we have my product, which is the mobile app. So WeTransfer asked me to work on that and build a presence on mobile a couple years back. So we already had the successful web product. So I was like, oh, that's pretty easy. We can replicate that success on mobile. But unfortunately, it was not. I didn't know anything about how to replicate that success. So we did a lot of research into how we could add value to our users, make a valuable product for our users. So me and my team went and did a lot of research. Basically, we tried to really view mobile from a very abstract angle. First, like from understanding kind of the scale of the platform, and then diving deeper into the characteristics. So we're definitely not there yet with the product, but the product we shipped about a year ago made us grow about 25 times in a year. So I think my learnings can be valuable. I'm not a designer though, so I can't tell you how to design, but I hopefully can shape some context around the mobile platform and the stuff that we learned when we were building our product, and then you can hopefully bring some value to your users. So there's kind of 3 major topics that I want to discuss. First is the scale of mobile. The second one is how hard it is to actually build something for mobile. And the third one are the characteristics and what is different between mobile and desktop. And I hope it's valuable and you can use it in your work. And hopefully you can use it to give some superpowers to us humans. So first I wanted to talk about the scale of mobile. When we did the initial research, one of the things that we thought about was, what is the biggest development of the last 20 years? What really kind of made an impact on the world? And I asked my team and I asked some of my friends, and almost everybody replied with the internet. And so then my next question was, what does the internet look like for you? And most of the people came with something like this. So it's kind of it looks like a desktop thing. It's Google. And for most of us in Europe and in the West, that makes a ton of sense because we were introduced to the internet through desktop computers. But a lot of the world has actually been introduced to the internet through phones. So for most people in the world, I think actually the internet looks like something like this. Mobile really kind of shifted the scale of the internet. So it's outgrowing PCs at an incredible pace. There's much more phones and phone users in the world than there are PC users. And there's a lot of people that actually just went straight to the mobile platform, so that have never used desktop. And it really is kind of bringing the internet to everybody. And I think that is super interesting. And another thing that I think is very interesting in this scale is how much time we actually spend on our phones. So the average American spends more than 3 hours on their phones every single day. And that may sound weird because I never see people like watching their phone for hours at a time, but people look at their phones very, very frequently. The average person looks about 80 times at their phone every day, so that's about every 10 to 12 minutes. So don't be ashamed if you look at your phone. And we might not realize that, but like most of us spend more time on their phones than we spend on desktop computers. So yeah, mobile is growing a lot, and that means not only that there's a really big audience that has smartphones, but it means that mobile kind of connects the entire world. Android phones especially are very accessible and cheap, so everybody can kind of get one now. So mobile is kind of becoming this thing that connects the entire world. So we won't talk about smartphone users from now on, or mobile users, but we'll talk about all people. So I really love this image. I think it's from the 90s. Nokia did this thing where they said, like, we're connecting the people. Well, it took a little longer, I guess, but I think mobile is now at a stage where they are actually connecting people. So the scale of mobile is huge, like I just said, and that really kind of changes the whole technology industry, because before, when Microsoft was big in the PC era, they were big. Microsoft and Intel were like big tech companies, but now Google and Facebook and Apple and the other winners of the mobile platform are actually the biggest companies in the world. So like the whole technology industry has changed by this extreme increase in scale. So my team and I, we understood that mobile was very important and very big, and then we were like, okay, how can we execute on this? How can we make something? So first we were like, well, let's just kind of use the thinking that we did on our desktop product and then kind of port that to mobile. So we did some research into the possibilities there, and then we found this great example of a company that really tried to do this at a big scale and was successful for a while, but eventually went down, and that's Microsoft. So I don't know if you know who this guy is, but this is Steve Ballmer, the CEO of, well, he's not the CEO of Microsoft anymore, but he was the CEO when the iPhone was introduced. And he had a very interesting reaction on the introduction of the iPhone, which I want to play for you.
$500 fully subsidized with a plan? I said, that is the most expensive phone in the world, and it doesn't appeal to business customers because it doesn't have a keyboard, which makes it not a very good email machine. Now, it may sell very well or not. We have our strategy. We've got great Windows mobile devices in the market today. You can get a Motorola Q phone now for $99. It's a very capable machine. It'll do music. It'll do internet. It'll do email. It'll do instant messaging. So I kind of look at that and I say, well, I like our strategy. I like it a lot.
Well, boy, did he know. So, yeah, he was actually... I get his reaction in this era, because Microsoft was killing it with PCs, and the way they viewed their mobile phones was an extension of the desktop. So that this incredible market share in both PCs and in smartphones at the time. So they were not afraid at all. But as you can see in this image, the way they designed their whole device, it was called Windows Mobile. So it's also in the name, Windows on but then mobile. They designed it in a way as it was the computer on the go. So in order to kind of deliver on the computer on the go, you need a physical keyboard, you need email, all of these things that are very PC-y. So they have the start menu on the device, all of these things that kind of remind us of a desktop computer. But that's not a great strategy, and Apple saw that, because the computer on the go will always be kind of a limited experience. So what Apple did is they kind of rethought the thing from the ground up, and they were making a product that was very much native to the mobile platform. And they were especially in a great position to do so because Apple actually didn't have a great desktop business at the time. And they had recently introduced the iPod, which was a new product that they built from the ground up that worked very well. So they made a very mobile-centric product, and they really approached it in a different way than Microsoft did. And one of the things that is very funny is that the name of the iPhone is about about you. It's the most personal device. And the devices that Microsoft produced were called Windows Mobile, which shows like that it is the computer on the go. So I really like how even in their naming strategy, you see the differences between the approaches. And I mean, the iPhone became the most successful product of all time. So I think their approach worked much better than Microsoft's. So when we were designing our new product for mobile, we realized like, hey, we shouldn't just port our success on the desktop. We should build something entirely new that's tailored towards the mobile audience and towards the mobile platform. Because mobile is the most personal device ever. And one of the things that I find very funny is that PCs mean personal computers, but they're not personal at all if you compare them to phones. Phones are by far the most personal devices. You carry them with you at all times. All your memories are stored on your phones. You do all your communication to those products. So it's a totally different device that's much more personal. So we understood that we needed to take like a new approach to it, but we had to figure out like how can we win on a new platform. And in order to do so, there's this great concept called S-curves. I don't know how many of you are familiar with this concept, but I think it's from a book named The Innovator's Dilemma by Clay Christensen, and it really describes kind of the adoption of a new technology. So first, a technology is very like small and has only early adopters. Then it goes really fast because there's like a critical mass that is reached and products become cheaper. And then in the end, a new technology comes along, so it goes slow, or they've reached some kind of market saturation. And the moments when this happens is different for every product and every technology, but the relative speed is pretty much the same. So what you want to do when you reach the top of the S-curve with a certain technology or certain product is you jump on the next one. So you kind of jump on the next wave. And that's actually super hard to do. Some companies manage to do it very well. Microsoft missed the wave that was mobile. But a company that did this really well, that made this jump very well, was Facebook. So about 6-7 years ago, Facebook had a thriving desktop business and actually, frankly, a good mobile product. And they were growing like crazy and they were doing really well. But they saw this behavior of people on mobile changing a little bit. So they saw that people were taking more pictures with their phones, stuff like that. And I think they realized that they couldn't build a product themselves that would work well for that audience. So they decided to buy one. And I think it was 2012 when they bought Instagram for $1 billion. And everybody said at that time that Facebook was crazy to pay so much money for such a small, simple app. But they were playing the long game. They understood the S-curves and the system, and it really paid off. I don't know if you've read the articles about the founders of Instagram leaving, but most of those articles mentioned that Instagram was kind of increasing Facebook's value by $50 billion. So that's a great investment. And it really allowed them to grow further than only desktop, and Facebook's growth has yet to stall. And Facebook pulled the same trick again when a new trend came around, which was more about sharing less filtered content and more real content. And a product that was especially well designed to do that was Snapchat. So Snapchat did this great kind of, I guess it spoke more to the millennial audience, photo product and video product. And what Facebook did then, instead of buying it, I think they did offer them some money, but they didn't accept the deal. They copied the product, and they did that really well. I'm not a big fan of copycats, but I think from a business perspective, this was a really great move. It allowed Facebook to grow even bigger, and well, I think everybody is using Instagram stories now, and Snapchat is in big trouble. So to win, you need kind of a mobile-first approach, and that's pretty obvious. You hear it all the time, but it's really like thinking about the product from its like characteristics and everything. And you need to kind of jump on that wave and understand that there's a new technology that has new and different constraints. So we didn't want to port something that we did on the desktop, so we had to kind of understand what the unique characteristics were of the mobile platform. So we kind of did our research and tried to kind of view everything from a very high level and abstract view. So we started with the inputs of mobile. And those are actually vastly different than desktop computers. So it was really nice to kind of see those differences and how those translate into design and into different products and value propositions. So on mobile we have touch, camera, location, and voice. And on desktop we have the keyboard and the mouse. And one caveat is that voice is not big in all markets. So I'm not going to dive into that one. But let's start with touch. So as Steve Ballmer mentioned back when the iPhone was introduced, it didn't have a physical keyboard. Touch was actually replacing the keyboard. And that means different behaviors. So where we used to send very big emails on desktop, we now send very small text on mobile. We send emoji, we maybe send pictures or GIFs. So because we're constrained by the touch keyboard that is not very nice to type very big long paragraphs on, it kind of changed the way we communicated. And I think that's super interesting how such a kind of simple shift can have such an incredible impact. Because it really impacts the way we now communicate with other people. Next input that I'd like to zoom in on is camera. So the camera really caused a photography boom on mobile. People take, I think, more pictures on a regular day now than they used to do in like 6 months before smartphones were a thing. So pictures are not only used to kind of capture memories. I think that was the photo camera use case before phones came around. But they're used for communication. We express ourselves by sending selfies to friends, or we communicate with larger groups through products like Instagram and Snapchat. So you could also say that the keyboard has been partly replaced by the camera. And I mean, there's this metaphor or this saying, right, where a picture says more than 1,000 words. I really believe that that happened with, it really compensated for the keyboard on the phone. So we really shifted from like the camera really changed kind of everything, and social media became much more about images than it was about text. And also another trend that I was very interested in was we went from filtered photos to like unfiltered video. So I think that's due to two things. One is that pictures have become more beautiful because the camera technology has become better, but also we've just become like much more okay with sharing pictures. It's just kind of the way we now communicate with each other. So see this trend in cameras from like filtered photos to unfiltered videos, and I think going forward we'll see more AR stuff. So I know that Apple introduced this augmented reality framework, and you can also see a lot of AR stuff popping up in the big social networks, like Instagram again. So when we were designing our product, we realized that the camera and photos had to play a big part in it. So 3 of the 5 adding options are actually photo options. So you can add photos, videos, and you can even scan documents in our app, and we see that about 99% of the content that people use in our product is very visual. So I think it paid off. Another very important input is location, and that location might sound like a very, very small thing. It's just like, sounds like a feature, but it really enabled a lot of new things. So besides it making sure that we don't get lost anymore, it really opened up a new market of transportation apps. So Uber, which is I think worth $72 billion now, is fully enabled by locations on phones. So if there wouldn't be any location on phones, Uber wouldn't be able to exist. And I think that kind of shows how these very small things in the inputs can have an incredible impact on kind of our lives. And I think that's very important. So mobile has different inputs, and it matters. When you're designing for mobile, I think it's very important to kind of understand the dynamic your problem or that you're trying to solve has with the different inputs. So you can kind of create something that really makes use of those inputs, and so that it strengthens your solution. But there's also another thing that's very important, which is the outputs. And the outputs of mobile are a little harder to describe because I think they're less obvious. So we obviously have like a smaller screen and often no audio. But I think one of the other things that makes mobile different is that we only like briefly view it every time. We only look at it for like a minute per session. So that changes kind of how we interact with it and how content should be presented on the platform. So it can be used anywhere, but it's also kind of a lot of the things that mobile is used to display are things that were created on mobile. So it's also heavily reliant on the inputs, which I just mentioned. So people are not going to read long text or stuff. They want to see visual stuff. So long emails, I think, will decrease over time and will go more towards visual products. And we can already see that a lot in many of the successful products. So even an app like Uber Eats has a very visual approach because that's easier to scan through on your mobile. So everything needs to be kind of easy to digest. And even for text-heavy products like Twitter, they are still very easy to digest because of the short text length and the use of images. And I think this kind of visual boom created a lot of new formats that are very interesting. So for example, GIFs had made a huge comeback because it's much easier to express something in a GIF than in a long text on mobile. And memes have become this huge thing that apparently influence elections. So I think this visual boom has created it's a big shift. So when we were designing our product, one of the things that we were kind of focused on is making it very easy to digest and very visual. So our web product has a very like kind of file list kind of structure, and on our mobile product we made it very visual and we created this beautiful grid so that people can kind of engage with the content from a distance, and it's more compelling, I guess. So mobile is very visual and it needs to be easy to digest. Whenever you design a product, you need to make sure that it's very visual. Another thing that I find very interesting is that mobile is designed with sharing in mind. So back when desktop PCs were created, there was no internet. So all the interfaces were designed to be about you, about your files. So you see a lot of buttons that are saving buttons, and everything is very private, and you can kind of create your own structure with your folders. And then there is some collaboration, but that's all through kind of like tools like WeTransfer.com, but it's very, very much based on like a local file system that belongs to you. On mobile, that's totally different. It's a communication platform. I mean, phones were meant for communication in the first place. So you really see that people kind of want to share everything on their mobile phones. And they do so. Like there's not really a private space. Everything on the mobile phone is very shared. So sharing has become this kind of new default. And I think it's very interesting because if you want to design a product for this, you need to make sure that you're kind of optimizing for sharing. So whether it's sharing into your app or out from your app, it's a very important thing that every entity in your product is very shareable. So it really created this new ecosystem around collaboration. And I think this image really illustrates that well, where you see that the desktop PC has this desktop with all your files on it, while the iPhone or every Android phone at first glance shows your notifications. So it's much more about communication and about working together. Collaboration doesn't come natural on the desktop PC, but it does on the phone. And people really don't have a file system on the phone anymore. They just kind of save everything in their messaging apps, and they communicate about it in those products instead of saving it somewhere local and then sharing it later. So you could even say that sharing has kind of become the new saving. So when we were designing our product, we really made sure that everything could be shared into our product, and everything that you made within our product, you could share outside of our product. So we really try to kind of be a good citizen of the mobile ecosystem there. And yeah, so like I just said, messages are kind of the new file system. Everything is now organized around conversations and around collaboration. And I think Slack, the team messaging tool, is doing a really great job there, where they made that more of a company-wide thing. And I think that's a very great approach that feels very mobile native to me. So the last thing I wanted to mention about the characteristics of mobile is about the ease of use of the platform. So one of the things that we did when we were designing our product was that we tried to really focus on ease of use. And one of the things that I find very interesting is that when mobile just started, users needed metaphors to kind of understand how to navigate their way around the platform and how to understand kind of the concepts of mobile. So you had all these skeuomorphic interfaces that really kind of visualized what a product was about and how to use it. And that worked really well, but as I said, we're spending so many hours on our phones nowadays, and we look at it so much that I think the audience today is much more comfortable with more clean interfaces. And well, you see that in all the design trends that people have been shifting from like that very visual, metaphorical approach to a more clean approach that's, I guess, less distracting. What we found is that people really understand how to use their mobile phones. There's no complications in that. So we spend a lot of time on making our interface very easy to understand, but actually it doesn't really matter. People understand plus buttons, share buttons. So as long as you follow like the basic guidelines, people will find your way around your interface. What's much more important is how people understand the concept of your product and its purpose. So we struggle a lot with that, where interfaces are very easy to use, but interfaces are much easier to kind of understand than the concepts of products. So I think that's something when you design your product, I think people need to spend much more time on kind of explaining the concept than on like fine-tuning the interface and making sure that's easy to understand. So everything looks similar nowadays, and I think that's very nice because it makes it very easy for everyone to navigate around mobile. So don't spend too much time on that. Focus on the problem that you're trying to solve. So let's wrap it up. The scale of mobile is huge. It's really connecting every human being on the planet. Everybody can communicate now through mobile. I mean, we're not on 100% distribution yet, but it's getting there. These mobile devices are the most personal device ever. Don't let the name PC fool you. It's really the most personal device. You carry it with you at all times. It's an extension to your right or left hand. To win on the mobile platform, you really need a mobile-first approach, and that means not porting something you made on desktop, but really trying to build something from the ground up and try to jump on this next S-curve that's called mobile. Mobile has vastly different inputs. We have touch, we have camera, location, and voice, and it really changes the way we interact with the product and also changes things further down the line, like the way we communicate. So when you design your product, you should make sure that you use those inputs and that they strengthen your problem, your solution. And mobile is very visual. Everything needs to be very easy to digest. People have a very short attention span, so you need to make sure that your app optimizes for that short attention span. And phones are communication devices, so you need to make sure that everything is shareable, and sharing really is the new default. And because everything is shareable and everything is centered around communication, messages have become the central place in the phone that really become, they are like the desktop of the phone. So it's a great thing to realize. And last but not least, interfaces are easy to understand, concepts are hard to understand, so make sure you spend time on explaining the concept and the interface. Make sure you follow the guidelines, and I think everything will be fine. So now it's up to you. I hope you can make some superpowers for us mobile users. Thank you. So I think we have time for questions.
Yeah.
Hi.
Hello. I was focusing on what you were saying about the interfaces, that interfaces are easier than to understand the concepts. And as a developer, I had lots of experiences about customer asking me lots of things.
Yeah.
And I was thinking about the tooltip system. The tooltip system, I think it's one of the best ways to help the user navigate the app, to understand what he could do or not do, how to explore his main functionalities. I think you were talking about something similar.
Yeah. I think tooltips is...
tutorials, etc., etc. Because I had the experience with people asking me tooltips and people just providing me the manual of the app or the website to consult, to try to understand how to navigate the website or the app.
Yeah, I think manuals are a very outdated system. I mean, we don't...
I had the experience with the manual. It was really, really crazy to read and to... I felt bad for the user that had to read the entirety of it.
Yeah. I mean, tooltips make a ton of sense. You need to explain everything within its context, and in a modern way, I guess that works with tooltips. Yeah, definitely.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sam, that was a great presentation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Have you thought about what's going to be the next big thing? Is it really going to be AR, and how would you incorporate that into your product?
So unfortunately, I don't know yet what the next big thing will be. I think within the mobile platform, it might be AR, but on a larger scale, I find it very hard. I think interfaces will become more abstract and less visual. You see that with like the voice products that are out there now. So I think a lot of tech will kind of go to the background. And I really like that idea where we went from desks that had like real files and folders on it to computers that kind of visualize those files and folders. And I think we're going back to a system where the computers become invisible. But how that future will turn out, I have no idea. With things like AR and those kind of things, I think, again, what you need to do there is kind of like make sure you kind of not focus on your previous legacy and try to build something new that works, that like leverages the characteristics and the constraints of those new technologies. And like from a business perspective, I would even like form a team around it that has nothing to do with the other products. So they're not kind of held back by the legacy of the previous stuff.
Any other questions?
Hello, thank you for your presentation. I've got a question according to digital health field. What do you think about the mobile future for health-related applications or tests? Is it going to be mobile because you still need to put the information on the screen? So in the health field, it's hard to base only on pictures. So is it that it depends on the field, or maybe everything is going to be mobile?
Really great question. I think this is a thing I still am not. I don't have all the answers on, but I think it is shifting kind of the way we work. So right now, all of the medical applications are designed for desktop computers. But maybe in the future, if people all have like wearables that tell them a lot about their health and tell the doctor a lot about their health, maybe there are other interfaces that make a ton of sense to kind of do health stuff upon. So I could imagine a future in which you have a wearable that knows a lot about your body, and then you talk to a voice-controlled thing to determine where you need to go. And only in the last stage you will need a doctor, because I think AI and voice technology can maybe kind of help determine what condition you're in based on the symptoms that you explain. So I think computers are not all going to go away, but I think they will definitely go more towards the background, and also in the health sector. But there's obviously things that we can't do without computers at this point. But I think another great example right now is, for example, radiology. So if you make like the X-rays, right now you need a very big screen for that to kind of analyze the pictures. But there's also AI that now can do those analyzing things. So that will make the computer obsolete. So I think by really changing the paradigms, a lot of these computer central things will kind of vanish.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, I guess we can finish.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
Thank